All right, good morning. Let's talk about the mechanics of craving. Craving, which of course is part of the addictive process, though it doesn't have to be. I mean, I crave things that I'm not addicted to, like green juice, for instance, is usually understood as like an intense wanting or desiring or jonesing for something, right? And it happens in the body, yeah? It's like a desperate need or crying out for the person's drug of choice and addiction. This is almost always part of withdrawal for people. But with the understanding that we have now about what addiction really is and how it relates to emotional repression, we can look at craving in a new and different way. In 12-step programs, they have a phrase that they use to describe what it's like when an addict isn't using, and that phrase is restless, irritable, and discontent. That's most people who struggle with addiction's experience of what it's like without their drug of choice. They experience themselves as restless, irritable, and discontent, which also happens to be an exact match for what it's like to live in an emotionally repressed state. When human beings bury and repress emotions, they live in a state where they're constantly fluctuating between low-level and high-level suffering. And so, naturally, addiction develops when they find something that temporarily and effectively soothes that suffering state. Interesting tidbit, for someone who's repressed anger since childhood and is always trying to repress or tamp down powerful emotions and calm themselves down, downer drugs like alcohol, opioids, or THC typically become their go-to drugs of choice. And for hurt and grief repressors who are always trying to push vulnerable emotions down out of consciousness, uppers like cocaine, Adderall, nicotine, other amphetamines, anything that will jazz them up and away from their buried grief. Anyhow, that was a side note. What a craving is the body's fear of not getting its drug of choice again. It's the fear of having to experience the emotionally repressed state, right? Of having to feel restless, irritable, and discontent. And so in KI's authentic recovery program versus in 12 steps abstinence-based recovery, what we say is don't worry about if you use or not, process the buried emotions that drive your restlessness, irritability, and discontentment so that the need to soothe yourself progressively falls away, and along with it, cravings. Because why would you have a fear of not using, which is ultimately a fear of feeling bad, when you don't feel bad? Now, of course, the flip of this fear is equally as important to look at, right? When people get into recovery, they have to take on this fear of using. There's usually some well-intentioned beliefs that go along with it, like if I use again, I'll never stop or I'll die. And though those beliefs and that fear may be important to hang on to in the context of an abstinence-based program, it's actually a hindrance in the process of reversing and resolving emotional repression, and here's why. If you stay landed on those beliefs and afraid, guess what that leads to? Restlessness, irritability, and discontentment. And guess what that produces? Cravings and the fear of not using. The game-changing recognition is that emotional repression drives the compulsion to use and the compulsion to not use. So both have to be challenged and resolved in authentic recovery. So hear this, if you've got an inordinate craving or compulsion to use something, and or if you've got an inordinate craving or compulsion to not use something, you've got resolvable, buried and repressed emotions in your body creating your suffering. And if you resolved them, you wouldn't have to worry about either thing. Powerlessness over using and over abstaining gets created by emotional repression and resolved as we come back into our power, which is true, authentic emotional freedom. If you'd like to get a taste of it, tap the link.